I want to tell you something I didn't admit to anyone for almost 4 years. Not my daughters, not my doctor, not the therapist I saw every other Thursday in a beige office that smelled like a candle trying too hard. Not one person got the honest version of what was happening inside me. The honest version was this: I had stopped wanting things. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way that scared anybody or set off alarms. I still got dressed. I still went to the grocery store. I still showed up to things. But the wanting, that particular hum underneath a day that makes you lean forward into it, that was gone. And I didn't know how to say that out loud, because from the outside, my life looked perfectly fine. I was 69 years old. I had a small house in Knoxville, Tennessee that was paid off. I had two daughters who called. I had a body my doctor described as remarkably healthy for your age, which I understood to mean my heart was strong and my blood work was good. But nobody was looking at the part of me that had quietly gone dark. My husband Gary passed in 2019. Colon cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. We were married for 38 years. He was the kind of man who remembered how everyone took their coffee and called people on their actual birthdays and laughed at his own jokes before the punchline. The house after he died was not quiet the way people describe. It was loud with everything he wasn't doing anymore. That's where this story starts. Not with a beach, not with a market. With a woman sitting at a kitchen table in Tennessee at 7 in the morning, coffee going cold, not sure what she was supposed to want from the day. I want to be fair and tell you what I tried before I found what actually worked. Because I don't want you thinking I gave up easily. I didn't. I tried everything a sensible woman tries. I redecorated the living room. I joined a book club with 8 women who were perfectly lovely and who I felt nothing in common with. I took a watercolor class. I visited my daughter Pam in Portland for 3 weeks, and we had a wonderful time, and I flew home and sat down on the couch and felt exactly as empty as when I'd left. Then I started spending money on travel the way a person does when they're trying to buy their way back to themselves. I did a river cruise through France. Beautiful. The chateaux were extraordinary. The wine was extraordinary. And I floated past all of it through the window of a climate-controlled boat, surrounded by other Americans my age, who were also floating past it through windows. And I felt the way you feel watching a documentary about a place instead of being in it. I went to Costa Rica because someone in the book club said the energy there was transformative. I stayed in an eco-lodge in the rainforest. A toucan sat on my balcony railing the first morning. I took a photograph of it and sent it to my daughters and thought, this should feel like something. It didn't. I spent 6 weeks in Italy. I know. I know how that sounds. 6 weeks in Italy and you still felt nothing. But it's true. Florence was magnificent. The food was magnificent. I walked until my feet gave up on me. And every evening I sat alone at a restaurant table eating something perfect and being absolutely nowhere. My younger daughter Beth, who is direct in the way only second children are, said it plainly on a phone call somewhere between Rome and Siena. She said, "Mum, you keep going to beautiful places and coming home sad. What are you actually looking for?" I didn't have an answer. That was the problem. I came home from Italy in the fall, and I told myself I was done spending money on not feeling things in expensive locations. I sat with it for a while. I watched television. I let the months go. And slowly, without deciding to, I started watching videos on my tablet late at night, the way you do when you're not sleeping well and the algorithm knows you better than you know yourself. That's how I found the Philippines. It wasn't one video, it was 100 of them, watched over 3 months in the dark while Tennessee went through its grey version of winter. Americans who'd moved there. Women my age, some of them. Not wealthy women. Regular women on fixed incomes, talking about morning markets and warm weather, and the particular quality of being seen by people who had no reason to see you. I kept pausing on that. Being seen. Because that was the thing I hadn't been able to name. After Gary died, I became someone things happened around rather than to. People were kind. People included me. But there's a difference between being included and being seen, and I had stopped being seen. I was the widow. I was the woman who needed checking on. I had become, without anyone intending it, and without fully knowing it myself, invisible. I researched for 4 months before I told anyone. Visa requirements, healthcare, cost of living, real numbers from real people, not brochures. I read forums and asked stupid questions, and read other people's stupid questions. I printed spreadsheets. I was a woman who had spent 38 years running a household and raising 2 daughters and working as a school librarian for 31 years. I was not going to do this carelessly. A city called Dumaguete kept appearing. They called it the City of Gentle People. It had a university in the center of it, which meant bookshops. That detail mattered to me more than I can rationally explain. When I finally told Pam, she went quiet for long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. "Mum," she said, "the Philippines." I told her I'd done the research. You don't know anyone there. I told her that was somewhat the point. She made me promise to book a return ticket, at least for the first trip. I promised. I booked a one-way and told her the return was flexible. I want to tell you about the moment the whole thing became real. It wasn't the flight, though the flight was 22 hours, and my back registered a formal complaint somewhere over the Pacific. It wasn't Manila, though Manila at 2 in the morning is its own education. The noise and the heat and the number of people who seemed to have somewhere urgent to be at 2 in the morning. It was a small moment on the bus from Cebu City South toward Dumaguete, somewhere in the middle of that 3-hour ride through the hills. I was looking out the window at the road, cutting through dense green, the coconut palms, the little painted houses, the school children in their white and blue uniforms, walking the shoulder like they owned it. And a woman sitting across the aisle from me, maybe 60, noticed me looking and said, "First time?" I said yes. She said, "You will love it. It is slow here. Slow is good." She said it the way you'd state something about weather. Matter of fact. Certain. And then she went back to looking out her own window. I thought about that for the rest of the ride. Slow is good. I had spent 4 years trying to outrun my grief by moving through beautiful places quickly, by filling the hours, by making sure I was always somewhere that was worth being. And here was a stranger on a bus telling me that slow was good, like it was obvious, like I should have known. I arrived in Dumaguete at dusk. The guest house owner, a small woman named Mrs. Reyes, who moved with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had been doing this for decades, showed me to my room, brought me a glass of something cold and orange, calamansi juice, I'd learn, which is what happens when a lime and a tangerine have a conversation, and told me dinner was at 7 if I wanted it. Not a question, just an offering. Dinner is at 7 if you want it. I sat on the edge of the bed in the warm dark and thought, I am 73 years old. I have been to France and Costa Rica and Italy, and I felt nothing. I am on the other side of the world, in a country I can barely find on a map. I might be losing my mind. Then I went down for dinner at 7 and ate the best fish of my entire life, and something in me, very quietly, leaned forward. The first week was the Palenque. The wet market near the center of town opened before sunrise, and I started going every morning out of something between curiosity and the need to have a reason to leave the guest house. Tiled stalls under corrugated roofing, Women behind wooden tables with pyramids of tomatoes and bundles of kangkong and mangoes that smelled the way mangoes are supposed to smell, but almost never do outside of a place like this. I didn't know what half of it was. I pointed at things. I held up fingers for quantities. I paid what I was told and smiled and moved on. And the women, and it was mostly women, running those stalls, running that whole market, they were patient with me in a way that wasn't condescending. They showed me things. They corrected my pronunciation of magkano, which means how much, with the particular delight of someone who finds a foreigner's effort genuinely charming rather than irritating. On my fourth morning, a woman named Coring, who sold vegetables from a stall near the entrance, called me over before I'd even approached her table. She held up a bundle of something dark and leafy I hadn't tried yet and said, "For you? You cook?" I said I did. She showed me, with the vegetables and her hands and some words I didn't have, how to make it into a soup with ginger. The whole lesson took 4 minutes. I bought the vegetables. I walked back and made the soup badly, and it was still extraordinary. The next morning, Coring waved me over again. "Better today?" she asked, meaning the soup. I told her yes, better. She nodded, satisfied, like she'd had something to do with it, which she had. That was the beginning of being seen. I need to tell you what I didn't expect, because this is not a brochure, and you deserve the whole thing. I was lonely in a way I hadn't prepared for, and the loneliness was a specific kind, surrounded by warmth and still on the outside of it. Everyone was kind, but kindness from strangers, when you haven't yet become something more than a stranger to them, has a limit. There were evenings on the boulevard, that long seawall road where the whole city came to walk at sunset, when I'd watch the three-generation families and the groups of friends and the old couples moving slowly together, and I'd feel it acutely. The particular ache of watching life that has deep roots when yours has recently been cut. I found the apartment at the end of my second week, second floor of a small building in a neighborhood called Bantayan, 10 minutes walk from the boulevard. Tiled floors. You learn to love tiled floors. They stay cool. A ceiling fan. A small balcony where I could sit with my coffee in the mornings and watch the street wake up. The landlord, a woman named Lynn, had a habit of appearing at my door with small amounts of food she'd made too much of. "I made too much," she'd say, every time, and hand me a container of something wonderful and leave before I could properly thank her. I understood eventually that she hadn't made too much. She was just watching out for me in the way that didn't embarrass either of us. Around week 5, I nearly left. I should say that plainly. I had my laptop open, flights back to Knoxville pulled up. Not because Dumaguete had failed me, because some part of me was asking a harder question than I'd been ready for. The question was this: what if you're not sad because Gary died? What if you're sad because you forgot who you were before you were Gary's wife? 38 years is a long time to be half of something, and I'd been so busy grieving the half I'd lost that I hadn't noticed I'd also lost the thread of the half that was mine. I didn't know what I liked anymore. I didn't know what I wanted. I'd been wanting things in relation to him for so long that wanting things for myself felt like a skill I'd let atrophy. What stopped me from booking the flight was a Wednesday afternoon at a small carinderia, a lunch counter, 2 streets from the apartment. The woman who ran it was named Nena, 50-something, quick-eyed, the kind of efficient that looks effortless only because you're not watching carefully enough. I'd been eating there most days. That Wednesday, she set my lunch down, and then, without my having asked, brought a small extra dish. "Try," she said. That was it. Just try. It was a version of kinilaw, raw fish cured in vinegar and calamansi and ginger, and it was the sharpest, cleanest thing I'd ever tasted. I told her so. She watched my face when I said it, not my words. And then she nodded once, like she'd confirmed something she'd suspected, and went back to the kitchen. A week later, she was making it regularly and setting a portion aside before the lunch crowd arrived. She never asked if I wanted it. She just knew. I sat with that for a long time. Gary had known how I liked my coffee. He'd known I needed quiet in the mornings and that I hated being surprised with plans. 38 years of being known like that. And then suddenly, nobody knowing anything about you at all. And here was this woman I'd known for 3 weeks, who'd been paying enough attention to know how I liked my food without being told. I didn't book the flight. I unpacked the last of my suitcase that afternoon. I'd been living out of it, I realized, keeping it half-packed like a signal to myself that leaving was still an option. I put everything in the drawers. Let me give you the numbers, because this is the part that makes it either possible or impossible, and you deserve the honest version. My apartment was 14,000 pesos a month. At the exchange rate when I moved in, that was about $250. In Knoxville, I had been paying $940 for a one-bedroom apartment I'd moved into after I decided the house was too much house for one person. The two spaces were not dissimilar in size. Electricity, I used the air conditioning at night, and fans during the day, ran about 3,200 pesos, roughly $57. Water was almost nothing. Internet, which I needed for video calls with Pam and Beth and the grandchildren, was 1,699 pesos, around $30. A woman named Ging came twice a week to clean and help with laundry. 3,000 pesos a month, about $53. And she became one of the steadiest presences in my life. She knew where everything went. She knew when to talk and when to be quiet. She brought her daughter sometimes on school holidays, and I'd help the girl with her English reading, which became something I looked forward to all week, groceries and eating out combined. And I ate out often because the food was extraordinary, and a full meal cost less than $2. Came to around $95 a month. My prescription medications, a blood pressure pill, and something for my thyroid cost $19 at the pharmacy 3 blocks from my apartment. In Tennessee, with insurance, I'd been paying $67. All in, my monthly expenses sat between $580 and $640. My Social Security and the small pension from 31 years in the school district came to $1,680 a month. For the first time since Gary died, the numbers went in the right direction every month, not dramatically, just steadily, reliably forward. I stopped doing the calculation in my head every time I picked something up in a store. That low-grade arithmetic of scarcity, I hadn't known I was doing it until I stopped. I called Beth about 4 months in, and she asked how I was managing, and I said, "I'm saving money, Beth. I'm actually saving money." She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Who are you, and what have you done with my mother?" There was a morning, 7 months after I arrived, when I woke up and realized the first thing I thought about was not Gary's absence. The first thing I thought about was whether Coring would have the small, sweet mangoes in yet, because she'd told me the week before they were almost ready. That was it. Mangoes. That was what my brain went to first. And I lay there for a moment understanding that something had shifted without my noticing. The way a season changes. Not in a day, but in an accumulation of days, until one morning the light is different, and you know without being told. I had a life. Not a performed life. Not a coping life. A morning mangoes, fish from Nana's, walk the boulevard, help Ging's daughter with her reading life. Mine. The hard parts are real, and I won't pretend otherwise. The heat in April is not weather. It's a condition. It sits on you and claims you, and you learn to move slowly and not care how you look. The power goes out, the brownouts. once or twice a week sometimes, and you keep candles and a battery fan, and you make your peace with it. The visa process has enough paperwork to test the patience of a person far more patient than me, and the lines at the immigration office are their own spiritual exercise. There is a roosting situation in the neighborhood that I cannot fully explain to anyone who hasn't experienced it. Roosters here do not operate on any schedule I have been able to identify, and they will share their opinions at 2 a.m. with a commitment that borders on the philosophical. I miss autumn. That is a genuine physical missing, the smell of it, the particular quality of October light, the way the maples along the highway go red all at once. I miss my daughters in a way that sometimes catches me mid-morning and stops me where I stand. Beth's youngest started walking while I was here, and I watched it happen on a phone screen. That's the real cost. It doesn't get smaller. But I am not missing the grey, empty Tuesdays. I am not missing the beige therapist's office. I am not missing watching beautiful things through glass and feeling nothing. Pam came to visit 8 months after I arrived. She'd been skeptical in the way that loving daughters are skeptical, protective, alert for signs that her mother had made a mistake she was too proud to admit. She came braced to find me, to find the sad, quiet version of me that she'd been worrying about from Portland. On her second morning, I took her to the Palenque. Coring, without being introduced, handed Pam a mango to try the way you'd hand something to a person who'd been coming to your stall for years. Pam looked at me. I shrugged. She ate the mango. We walked the market for an hour. Pam is not a crier, but by the time we got to the far end near the fish stalls, her eyes were doing something. I asked what was wrong. She said, "Nothing's wrong. You look like you again." I forgot what you looked like when you looked like you. I didn't say anything. We kept walking. That evening we sat on the boulevard and watched the families go by in the warm dark, the vendors grilling bananas on small carts, the university students in their loose clothes, the old men on the seawall playing chess with the calm of men who have nowhere else to be. And Pam said the thing I'll keep for the rest of my life. She said, "Mum, we spent 4 years trying to fix you from the outside. All of us. The trips, the check-ins, the suggestions. And none of us figured out that what you needed wasn't to be fixed. You needed to be somewhere that didn't already know you were broken." I thought about that for a long time after she said it. She was right. Every place I'd tried before, France, Costa Rica, Italy, I'd arrived as the woman whose husband had died. Even when I didn't say it, it came with me. The grief was my identity. And Knoxville, the book club, the redecorated living room, all of it already knew the sad version of me and couldn't unknow it. Here, I arrived as nobody, a stranger on a bus who was experiencing her first time, a foreign woman who didn't know what Kangkong was, someone whose history was entirely her own to give or keep. And in that blankness, somehow, the person I'd been before everything got complicated had room to come back. I am 73 years old. I am a retired school librarian from Knoxville, Tennessee. I am a widow. I am a grandmother. I am a woman who walked into a market in a small Philippine city, not knowing a soul, and slowly, unremarkably, over the course of ordinary mornings, became someone people waved to, someone Coring saves the good mangoes for, someone Nana's Kinnilaw is made for, someone Ging's daughter reads to on school holidays, sounding out the hard words carefully, looking up to make sure I'm listening. I found something in Dumaguete that I couldn't find in any of the beautiful places I tried. Not a view, not a feeling you can photograph. Something slower and more durable than that. I found the place where someone would notice if I didn't show up. After Gary, nobody had to notice. I had become optional in my own days. Here I am, not optional. If you are somewhere right now, and I think you might be, or you wouldn't have watched this far. Sitting in a house that has gone quiet, or going through the motions of a life that stopped fitting when someone you loved left it. I want to say the thing nobody said to me clearly enough. You are allowed to go looking for a reason to lean forward again. It is not a betrayal. It is not giving up. It is, I believe, exactly what they would have wanted for you, even if you can't feel that yet, especially if you can't feel that yet. The wanting comes back. It comes back in small things first. Mangoes that are almost ready, a soup that gets better every time you make it, a child's voice sounding out a word she didn't know yesterday. And one morning you wake up and the wanting is just there, ordinary and reliable, like a light you forgot was on. I wake up now and the street is already happening below my balcony. The tricycles, the vendors, Lynn's voice somewhere in the building, already managing something. Ging's footsteps on the stairs, Tuesdays and Fridays, right on time. The day leans toward me. I lean back. That's all I was looking for. That's the whole thing. And I almost didn't come.